Okay, so welcome back to another period correct benchmark video, and in today's video we're going to be testing Max Payne on the GTX 680 2GB that is paired with a Core i7 3930K running at 4.2 gigahertz, and that is paired with 32 gigabytes of DDR3 quad channel memory running at 1866 CL11, and currently we are at 768p. Everything maxed out except for MSAA and DX11 mode enabled. Now, I'm going to be testing a specific scene here. Initially, I'm going to do resolution scaling first because changing some settings here, you need to restart the game. Okay, so 768p, max settings without MSAA, and this specific scene here is CPU intensive and GPU intensive, so let's get right to it. All right, so as you can see, we are hitting around 120-ish frames per second here, which is pretty good, I'd say, especially considering we're running maxed out settings. Sure, it is at 768p, but I also just want to point out that the reason why I'm using these resolutions is because of this specific graph. I'm going to put it up on the screen right now, and you'll see that this person from Reddit actually took all the popular resolutions from the Steam hardware. Well, he took the Steam hardware survey and put it in a graph when it comes to resolutions. So that's where I get these resolutions I'm testing from. Right now, the 3930K is running quite hot here. The reason is it is still the stock cooler, okay, but 4.2 gigahertz is about a 10% OC on the frequency. It does boost to 3.8 gigahertz stock, but on the stock cooler it can run a little bit warmer once you go above 4 gigahertz, right? So that's why I'm just this specific scene, especially is CPU limited. You can see we are hitting 60% CPU usage, 70 up GPU usage. I mean, 60%, 70%. So definitely CPU limited, but that will change the moment we start increasing the resolution, right? So yeah, I think the game looks pretty good for a 2012 game, and let's just go ahead and increase the resolution, and then I'll just restart the checkpoint. All right, so still maxed out settings except for MSAA and 1080p. So as I said, I'm just gonna restart the checkpoint and then see what kind of performance difference or what kind of performance we see. And we're still getting almost a high refresh rate experience, right? Depending what you call a high refresh rate experience. I'd say anything above 100 would count for me personally, but anyway, that's just that's neither here nor there. Okay, so 145 up until 160 frames per second, we are a lot less CPU limited. Our GPU usage is sitting in the high 90s most of the time, right? So definitely GPU limited here, still 120 to 130 frames per second, average of 138. The lows aren't that great, right? We're seeing 62 0.1% lows, and I mean 130-ish for the averages, but there's quite a lot happening here on the screen in this specific spot. That's why I test here. I'm going to do DX11, DX9, DX10 scaling in another area, but this is just to show you what the game performs like in a little bit more heavy areas when it comes to both the CPU and GPU. Okay, so I'm going to increase the resolution to 1440p. Now, I know not a lot of people had 1440p monitors back in 2012 when this game came out, but I'm just curious to see how well this GPU would perform here. Okay, so 1440p and everything's still maxed out here. And let me just restart the checkpoint again. And we are still getting 90-ish frames per second, right? I think this is a very good showing, especially considering we are maxing it out except for MSAA, right? We'll do some MSAA testing just now, but MSAA is very heavy, as is to be expected, but I think this is a pretty good showing here. Okay, so I'm going to drop this down back to 1080p, and we're going to go to another area which is more GPU intensive, and I'm going to start testing MSAA, but firstly we need to get a baseline, right? So first test would be with MSAA off. All right, we are in this jungle area, and as you can see, our frame rate is quite a lot lower than in the previous area. This is without MSAA. I mean, this specific spot here is quite heavy. The further we move into the level, the less demanding it becomes, but it is, as I said, it is definitely a lot heavier than the previous section on the GPU. But that's why I tested the previous section, is because I wanted to stress the CPU and the GPU. You can see our CPU is, I mean, it's still at around 25% CPU usage, but this is a 6-core 12-thread CPU, so I mean, its usages would be quite low, especially for a game from this era. Okay, so 100 and see, I mean, over here we're getting 120, 130 frames per second, right? Even 140 at times. It's just that that first section is very, very heavy. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to enable MSAA. We'll start off with 2x, and then we will just apply the settings, restart the game, and take it from there. All right, here we are back in this exact same spot, just with 2 times MSAA, and you can see we just above 60 frames per second at the start of the map here. But as we saw earlier, the more we progress into the level, the higher the frame rate. Okay, so 70-ish frames per second. MSAA is very heavy, right? So this is to be expected. MSAA 8x, it's the highest that we can go on this game. Not the highest we can go on this GPU though. It will we'll probably stick to MSAA 2x at 1080p, because going over that, it's just very, very heavy. Okay, so in this spot we're still seeing up to 100 frames per second, which is pretty decent, I think. All right, so that's going to be it for MSAA 2x. Gonna test MSAA 4x and then 8x, and you'd expect the frame rate to halve and halve again, and you might be somewhat correct. Okay, so here we are back, and MSAA 4x, and immediately we are seeing quite a big hit to our frame rate. Now, the reason why it is not exactly half, right, is because MSAA does not apply to the whole scene, only to edges. So the edge and, well, the edge anti-aliasing is basically 4x, 2x, 8x, whatnot. Okay, so not seeing 60 frames per second in that first area, obviously that was to be expected. I'm not sure why we are seeing some frame time spikes here, but we are getting over here, we're starting to see 60 frames per second again, 70 at times. So again, it depends on where you are in the game, what exactly you're doing. 4x MSAA 1080p might actually be fine for 90% of the game, right? It still looks plenty good. This game looks very good for a 2012 game. All right, and then last one we're going to be testing is MSAA 8x, and then we'll do some DX scaling. But 8x MSAA, we might spill over our VRAM here. Okay, but let's see. All right, and here we are at 8x MSAA, and this is pretty rough. All right, so it's pretty rough by 2025 standards, but back in 2012, 30 to 40 frames per second really wasn't that bad. Now, sure, there were still a lot of people, myself included, that targeted 60 frames per second even back in 2012, but also a lot of people really didn't care that much, right? There are still people in 2025 that target 30 frames per second. No shade to them at all. It's just that, you know, it's become kind of the norm to push for 60 FPS with PC, right? Higher settings, higher frame rate, that kind of stuff. It's possible on the correct rig, but over here, like 8x MSAA, we are seeing much higher frame rate than the start of the level, but still dropping like 40-ish frames per second. That's quite rough. So one thing that you can do is you can just drop this. Let me get rid of this one. You can just drop it to 768p, and we should be getting 60 frames per second again. So many resolutions. back in the day. Like so many that people still used. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply this. I know it's the on-screen display is going to be a little bit bigger now, much bigger now. Okay, but we went from 40 to 60, 70 FPS, and I accidentally triggered this one. Sorry. Okay, so I think it's pretty decent. 60 FPS on what is considered the second most popular resolution back in 2012 based on this hardware, the Steam hardware survey. It might not be 100% accurate, right? But it does give us an idea of what majority of people used, or what many people used. But I also do think that the 768p resolution was a lot more popular in the Steam hardware survey because of laptops. Right, back then 768p was quite a common laptop resolution. All right, I think that's going to conclude our normal testing. I'm going to do very short DirectX testing as well, just with the first area of this level. We're just going to do DX 9, 10, 11, whatnot. There's actually two versions of 10. So I just want you to note here. All right, so if we change DX settings, we are going to lose access to MSAA, ambient occlusion, tessellation, right? So if we drop down to 10.1, we lose ambient occlusion and we lose tessellation. And then DX10, we lose MSAA, and then DX9, we don't lose anything. Okay, so we're going to start off with DX9, and we're going to start off with 1080p, and let's see how this goes. I just want to test the differences between them. Okay, so here we are, DX9, 1080p, and I mean, we don't have ambient occlusion or MSAA or tessellation. Okay, so let's see what kind of frame rates we are looking at. Kind of expecting a little bit more, to be honest. Right, so 108. I mean, it's decent, but I just want to point out that the frame time graph looks a little bit more inconsistent than with DX11. Now, it could be just a little bit more exaggerated because the frame rate is higher, but I did test DX10 a little bit more extensively, and I did see some more frame time issues with DX10 than I did with DX11. Okay, so getting up to 150 FPS here. Okay, so 130-ish FPS, pretty decent, but expected a little bit more based on the visual quality of the game. So I'm going to do DX10 with exactly the same settings. I just want to see, I don't think we're going to see any differences. All right, so DX10 and everything's still set to max, except, I mean, obviously for the ones we can't set. Okay, so see, still kind of the same frame rate. We might see some better CPU usages, less stuttering. I don't know. Like, obviously there's differences between DX9 and DX10, and it's maybe not as apparent at first. Though I do think we might be seeing, I think we're seeing more or less the same frame rate, right? But it could be just multi-threaded support better in DX10 than in DX9, although I think it's only from like DX later versions of DX11, maybe even DX12, where multi-threading became more widely supported. But over here, still 130-ish FPS, 140, 150. So like frame rate wise, it's pretty much the same. So 150-ish frames per second there. I'm gonna do DX11 10.1 maybe. Do we have to do it? Because I'm not going to enable MSAA, right? I'm just going to go directly to DX11 here with MSAA off as well. And SSAO, you can set this to HDAO, but obviously we can't now because we need to apply the settings first. Right, and here we are with DX11, and the frame rate might be slightly lower than previously. We were seeing 120-ish. So the frame rate is slightly lower with DX11. I did not enable any of the enhanced DX11 features. Okay, but the game definitely benefits a lot from MSAA, especially in these jungle areas, right? There's a lot of shimmering in the plants, especially in movement, right, which FXAA just can't resolve properly. Just makes them a little bit more blurry as well. So with the regards to the DX options themselves, really not that big a difference, but the difference will come in the form of which settings you can apply with the different API levels, right? So DX11 gives you access to MSAA, and you can actually adjust SDAO, SSAO, and HDAO. It actually looks a lot better. HDAO looks a lot better. Like you can see the differences being applied in real time. It's just the ambient occlusion, right? To me, it looks better. Play around. It does have a slight performance impact in my testing that I've seen. So play around and see which works best for you. I'm talking about this as if it's a new game and people are going to go out and buy this game and hardware based on this game's requirements, specifications. That's not going to happen, right? But I just want to point out that these systems, this GTX 680 plus the 3930K plus 32 gigabytes of RAM, a 500 gig SATA SSD, a Windows 10, it's activated. I'm not going to tell you. I did not buy a specific Windows key for this specific system, right? But I just want to point out that what I paid for the system is less than a modern AAA game. Okay, so you can build this system for, I think I spent just over $50, $55 or something. Okay, not that I'm saying you have to go out and do this, and because there will probably be issues. Okay, these systems are very old. The hardware is very old, so the chances of you running into issues are quite high, and the risk is a little bit high because you also don't have warranty. Okay, but if you do have $50, $60, $70 to spare and you want to play all the games on period correct hardware, like, it's really cheap to build these systems. So whilst we wait for Max to eavesdrop there, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.